Soy Chicana. I am not Latinx, and I am certainly not Hispanic. Soy Chicana. I come from the quintessential Chicano family, born and raised on the east side of Pueblo, Colorado in the 70s, where lowriders and other souped-up cars roam frequently around our blue-collar steelworker union town, jamming to the tunes of War, Santana, Miles Davis, Earth, Wind and Fire, Malo, Suavecito, mi linda. Our neighborhoods were clean and safe, and our Chicano neighbors became our extended relatives who would send home beans and chile to us in country crock butter containers, or as we would call it, Chicano Tupperware. Everyone in our neighborhood was fluent in Pueblo Spanglish, and you would hear it spoken in our corner grocery stores and meat markets. We took care of one another. We were proud Puebloans, proud Chicanos. My Chicano hippie family lives on the fringe. We don't like to color within the lines. My grandparents were proud ranch hands, farm workers, and restaurant owners. My parents, sisters, and cousins are visual artists, poets, jewelry makers, musicians, and social justice activists. You could see our Chicanismo in the strokes of our paintbrushes on a blank canvas, or in the vibrant turquoise and silver symbols we make and wear representing our indigenous ancestors from the Northern Cheyenne and Dene tribes. The women and the men in our family cooked our sabroso recipes, passed down from our Mexican and Spanish ancestors who have occupied southern Colorado for 6 generations. Yes, we didn't cross the border crossed us. Soy Chicana. I remember when I was 17, my dad and I ventured to a dark and seedy bar in my hometown to meet with an admissions counselor from CU Boulder, whose job was to recruit folks like me, low-income, first-generation college students. This Chicano counselor put the pen in my hand, and together we completed my daunting admissions and financial aid applications. He looked my dad in the eye and he says, "Don't worry, Gil, I'm going to take care of your hita." And he did, along with other numerous Chicano and Chicana educators during my academic career. As the first in my family to go to college, I arrived in Boulder in 1987, where the town was nearly 90% white, where many lived in multi-million-dollar houses, while our campus only had about 4% Hispanic students out of 25,000. I always remember the first day in one of my journalism classes where my white male professor plopped his books down on our desk and said to us, intending to be sarcastic and ironic, "Welcome to Boulder, the island of white privilege." His startling words taught me that I needed to become Hispanic in order to blend in to our super wealthy, lily white university. Yet I was a closet Chicana, only to my African American roommate, Carrie, who coddled my soul each night as we each curled up in our twin beds, munching on my mom's homemade salsa, while a rotating tabletop fan was on in our little dorm room constantly. We used that white noise to drown out the white noise, which were the sounds of the sorority girls who crowded our hallways in their constant privileged chatter about frat parties and going skiing on school days with their trust funds. Carrie and I talked about our social identities and how they didn't vibe at CU. It wasn't cool to be Chicana or African American on our campus. We stood out as the only brown and black faces in most of our classes. We did our best to act white to survive. Yes, survive, not thrive. But during my last 2 years in college, I found my Chicanisma. I was one of 4 leaders in our all-female Chicano student organization called MECHA, which stands for Movimiento Estudiantil Chicano de Aztlán. We were brown and loud and proud and brilliant. We upheld the student activism that our colleagues from Los Seis de Boulder began. We protested Linda Chavez and the English-only amendment. We protested the wars in Iran and Iraq. We protested in front of the chancellor's and president's offices, demanding that they divest in South African corporations that supported apartheid. But our biggest accomplishment was creating the very first Semana de la Chicana, a week-long symposium featuring Chicanas in the arts, education, law, politics, and business. I am proud to say that this event is still happening on our campus some 32 years later. But I couldn't wait to graduate and be away from the whiteness of our campus. The irony is that I graduated from CU, but later returned as a staff member and ran the very successful pre-collegiate development program. I left again to earn my PhD and became a part of the 8% of Chicanas nationally with PhDs. Then I returned again as a faculty member. With each time I set foot on our campus, I displayed more political courage and self-righteous power than I did before, especially when I became Dr. Maes and became one of maybe a dozen Chicano faculty on our campus. I quickly realized that my sheer existence here was my resistance. My Chicanisma has been gifted to my Black, brown, and Indigenous and Asian students I meet each day in my classroom, where I teach them about power, privilege, and oppression, the intricacies of critical race theory and counter-storytelling, or about the beauties of Chicana feminisms and the multi-layers of Chicano history and culture. I teach them that their own existence on our campus is their resistance. Over the past few years, I've realized that my students today have a new sense of political courage that I never had. Their political courage is now reaching the masses. My students, who are still mechistas y humaceros, who are multicultural leadership scholars, who are ethnic studies majors, are now calling themselves Chicanx or Latinx. They are marching in the streets for Black lives, for women's reproductive rights, for Indigenous rights. They're creating podcasts, websites, blogs. They're leaving their digital footprint to reach folks on the right and those who are right with their loud and proud and provocative messages of freedom, democracy, and equity for all. But back on our campus, I'm finding that things change for our Chicanx, Latinx, and Chicano students, the more they stay the same. As it was for Los Seis de Boulder students in the 70s, and with the Mechistas in the 90s, today's Chicanx, Latinx students on our campus are plagued by those same feelings of isolation, marginalization, and racial battle fatigue because programs like the Multicultural Leadership Scholars, their homes away from home, are always on the chopping block to be cut. These students are working full-time and going to school full-time, deciding whether they should sleep or study each night. They are tired of fighting for their much-deserved financial aid or scholarships that were promised to them. They feel as if their professors or the administration does not understand that they are traveling on 2 to 3 buses a day to get to our campus. They feel like no one understands that they are caring for their little hermanitos back home while their parents are working the night shift. They feel like no one understands that they must send home the money from their student loan checks or the money they earned from their work-study jobs just so that their family could survive one more month. The more that things change, the more they stay the same. And yet what gives me hope is that while my institution and other predominantly white institutions have not changed, I see in my students the same fighting spirit that Los Seis de Boulder had in the 70s. I see my fighting spirit in them. It was passed down to them like the recycled Chicano Tupperware, filled with beans and chile and love that will keep us grounded for one more day. I see proud Chicanx students who will not be silent. I see proud Latinx students who will resist. They are brown and proud and beautiful and brilliant. They exist. They resist. And they inspire me to keep fighting for one more day and to keep saying loud and proud, "Soy Chicana." Thank you.